Welcome to the BuiltOnAir podcast, the variety show for all things Airtable. In each episode, we cover 4 different segments. It's always fresh and different, and lots of fun while you get the insider info on all things Airtable. Our hosts and guests are some of the most senior experts in the Airtable community. Join us live each week on our YouTube channel every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and join our active community at BuiltOnAir.com. Before we begin, a word from our sponsor, On2Air Backups. On2Air Backups provides automated Airtable backups to your cloud storage for secure and reliable data protection. Prevent data loss and set up a secure Airtable backup system with On2Air Backups at On2Air.com. As one customer, Sarah, said, having automated Airtable backups has freed up hours of my time every other week and the fear of losing anything. Longtime customer David states, On2Air Backups might be the most critical piece of the puzzle to guard against unforeseeable disaster. It's easy to set up, and it just works. Join Sarah, David, and hundreds more Airtable users like you to protect your Airtable data with On2Air Backups. Sign up today with promo code BuiltOnAir for a 10% discount. Check them out at On2Air.com. And now let's check out today's episode and see what we built on air.
Welcome back to the Built on Air podcast. We are in episode 6 of season 22. Good to be with you. Myself, Dan Fellers, Camille Parks, and Alli with us this week. And special guest, Scott Bergman. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
Good to have you on. We're going to hear more from Scott later in the show. I'll walk us through what we're going to be talking about today. As always, we'll start with our Around the Bases, get you up to date on everything going on in the world of Airtable, all the latest news and updates and discussions in the communities. Then talk about how you can start backing up your data using On2Air Backups. And then after that, we'll learn more about Scott, his background and story, and everything he's got going on. Then he's going to walk us through a product that he built, Tablemate and Text AI, I believe is what he's going to share with us, and how that works, that extension. And then a shout out to join our community. And then finally, we're going to end with some tricks and tips in the interface layer with Alli. So with that, around the bases, few big updates. First spotted in the BuiltOnAir community. Actually, I'm going to move this one. Let's jump here. Okay, dark mode is finally here. So dark mode came out. We had seen hints of it in the previous weeks. It is now available, and I've been using it. Camila and I were talking before the show about it. I don't know, Scott or Alli, if you're using it yet. Thoughts on dark mode?
I get more excited about dark mode on my phone, like for, I don't know, literally for nighttime. But like on my computer, I don't usually like get super excited about it. But
yeah,
I can see why people are.
Yeah.
I personally use dark mode on my computers, and I was trying out the dark mode for Airtable, and some parts look really good, and some parts to me still need a lot of adjustment. Particularly in interfaces, color just doesn't seem to translate well. Like if you have, if you color your base to any one of their colors, the sidebar in interfaces is supposed to maintain that color, and they look so dark that they're practically imperceivable from black. So there's some balancing. I think there needs to be done, some legibility for high contrast areas and stuff like that.
Yeah, like Martin mentions here, the icons a little bit difficult. Yeah, kind of similar experience. I've been using it. I don't know if I'll keep using it on my computer. It is difficult sometimes, like bug or errors in automations still show up as why you got to highlight the text to actually be able to read it. So there's definitely some room for improvement. It is in beta, so they made that clear. It's beta, public beta. So I understandable. There's still some work to be ironed out, but they also made the community dark as well. So now the community is in dark mode. In honor of that, I don't know if it'll stay or switch. I don't know if the community, if you can toggle that, or is that for everyone no matter what?
It might be following your system setting, but Dan, if you could scroll all the way to the bottom of the page. The footer, this, and then the footer. This is what I mean. It's like some of these should have been plainly evident when they were ready to, make dark mode publicly available, beta or otherwise. This feels like a glaring omission. This is just the community page, but the Airtable, the application has several areas that are similarly, I think, undercooked.
Yeah. So yeah, I think people giving kind of similar feedback there. Yeah, still areas. Okay. Let's see. Next one. So yeah, let us know your thoughts on dark mode. Okay. Another big announcement. Custom interfaces. They announced this sneak peek of a feature coming soon. So custom interfaces, so the ability to move or write extensions inside of your interfaces. And what I thought was interesting is it's full screen. So it's basically essentially an interface page where the entire page is your custom extension. Although it looks like the filter and the sort is outside of the extension. I don't think that's the extension.
It looks like it's taking up the same area that a full page list or a full page calendar, etc., would take up. And that makes sense to me because ideally you would have you would be able to use native parts of Airtable's functionality to provide filtering, so you don't have to bake that into every extension you make. And that just gets passed down as like a data source property or something to the extension you add. I would be curious to see if you would be able to make not just custom full pages, but custom elements that could go on a detail page or on a dashboard or something like that. I think that'd be very useful, especially the example they're showing is a map, and maps and dashboards go hand in hand.
Yeah, I agree. I hope that is coming. Yeah, and kind of some context awareness of you're on a single record view. Yeah, it would be interesting how that would play out. So I'm definitely interested. I've signed up for the beta. I have not gotten access to it yet, so I'm excited to try it out.
Same. There's some investigation I think someone in our Slack community had done where Airtable's GitHub, they have a couple examples for interface-based extensions already on there. And the application that they're using is the same blocks API that is currently in place today for regular extensions that go within the data view. So that's pretty promising from my perspective, because it seems like there might not be as heavy as a lift as maybe I was fearing for. I have several extensions already. Do I have to recode them from scratch for them to be compatible with interfaces? I'm sure there's some stuff that I would need to edit, but because it's the same SDK, it's probably not. I probably don't have to change everything.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so definitely excited to see this one evolve. This was always the top request I've had for them for a long time. Also being a extension, that makes me think. I'm like, maybe I need to bring back some of my old extensions that would play nice inside of an interface. We'll see. All right, next one. Let me make sure didn't miss any. Okay, here's one. If you are asking, so a question about chatbots, if how to build a chatbot for your website where the data that the chatbot uses comes from Airtable. So there's some responses here. Scott actually did a demo of this on our podcast using chatbot.com. Ben also says it's fairly easy to set up in Zapier. You can set that up. N8N, I think you can also set that up as well. So there are ways to do that if you're looking to create your own chatbot on that front. There's one more here. No. Okay. Oops. Close that guy. Okay. HyperDB is now available to anyone in the enterprise level. Jen saw this. It was actually noticed that in the API documentation, it now has the documentation for how to interact with the HyperDB via the API. So you can now, at first it was only read-only. Now it looks like you can update. I think delete was there as well. But so now you can update, so you can insert new records into your HyperDB and whatnot. So I believe they also announced that. Oh yeah. And it looks like they're now asking for it on all their OAuth for the permissions to interact. So even if you don't have enterprise, it asks for it. So this led to some confusion. Scott Rose mentioned some of his clients are like, wait, do I have access to HyperDB? But they're not on enterprise. So that's kind of confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, one of the pieces of feedback I gave for HyperDB prior to its general launch was if you're an individual user, you could, and you had access to the HyperDB beta, you could specify an API token as being for a particular base or set of bases for everything in your enterprise org unit, or a specific or several specific HyperDBs. But if you were editing a service account, service accounts didn't have a separate HyperDB option. And that kind of spun into how Airtable, I guess, defines resources for what a token, or I guess OAuth as well, can have access to. And in some places, HyperDB was lumped into everything else, and sometimes it was specifically called out as something separate. And maybe Scott's perspective, it might have been more clear to users if HyperDB was kept separate, because it is technically a separate object type. It's similar to a table within a base, but it's also vastly different in some regards. So I can see them making a decision either way, but it is interesting that originally it was a little messy of how HyperDB was categorized with regard to granting external applications the ability to edit them in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, and with HyperDB, we're gonna have to do a deep dive on this now that it's out there. Let's see. So as far as creating or updating, is there a limit on the number? So you can do multiple records at once.
Yes. So from what I've been able to test prior, I don't know if this has changed. There was no hard limit for the amount of records that you could modify or add at a given time. It was more based on the payload size. So I was regularly doing tests for a HyperDB table that had about 20 fields on it, 300 records at a time, if that gives anyone any kind of baseline. I think it really depends on the amount of data you're sending per record rather than the number of records itself, which is the advantage of storing certain information in a HyperDB, because with the regular web API, you're limited at 10 records maximum per call, which is terrible.
Yeah. Not very many.
No.
Yeah.
Not it.
Yeah, and it looks like as far as like field types, it only supports strings and numbers.
There's dates are supported as well, unless I'm misremembering. I feel like there was one other field type that is available. But yeah, there's no arrays. There's definitely no array type. You can have single selects as the way that strings are interpreted. So you can make a field a single select type and it works similar to how you're familiar with them. But there's no multi-selects. There's no linked record. There's,
Yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah, definitely something we'll keep an eye on. Love to hear feedback if people are using HyperDB, what your thoughts are with it.
Yeah, I've yet to see anybody using it. It'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Next one. This I thought was interesting. So CEO of Airtable, Howie Liu, is starting his own podcast. So he's starting a podcast called Builders and Breakthroughs, a new Thoughtcast series hosted by Airtable's co-founder and CEO. So he just had his first episode with a chief product officer at Cisco. And so, yeah, I think this will be interesting if you want to see where Airtable CEO Howie is thinking and talking to people. This might be a podcast worth checking out.
Did you give it a listen? Curious how it was.
No, I just listened to just this 10-second clip.
Got it.
So I haven't listened to the whole one. Yeah.
I probably will.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. He thinks. Yeah, and this 10-second or 20-second clip doesn't have Howie talking. It's just a response from G2. Okay, one more. This is from the Reddit Airtable subreddit. How do you clean up your base? I thought this was a good question. If you've been using Airtable for any amount of time, you know it can get a ton of unused fields and linked record fields that get disconnected but still remain as orphaned, all sorts of stuff. Formula fields you no longer need or don't think you need. So the process of cleaning up your base, that's something that everybody has to deal with. So there's some good approaches here. Start with a fresh view, hide all the fields, then just add them back slowly to evaluate them, any that look. So it's kind of a manual process. I think maybe, Scott, you might have responded to this.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed your logo there. So using AI, you want to talk about what you do there?
Yeah, so less so for cleaning up the fields, though it can be used for that too. So often the data you have is just like messy and a formula won't be the thing to clean it. It could be that all of the data is formatted, with different casing or whatever it is. And so a lot of times I just rely on AI to be the thing to clean it up. But also if you have several fields that are like similar data, but not exactly the same, and you want to just create like a master version and get rid of all those other fields, you can use AI to synthesize the information and combine it in some format you want and have that become your master field and then just delete the other ones basically. So that's just a couple of the ways you can use AI to do some of that cleanup. Not all of it, but some of it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it looks like we might get a demo of a tool that could help in that use case. I don't know, Alli, Camille, what are your tips and tricks on pruning?
I have so many little things that I've done over the years. I could literally dedicate an entire episode just to talking about this. But one of my favorite things I've done recently is I have, a metadata table of all of my fields, and I use a script to update that. I have my own script, but you could also, Kavan, I believe, still has one in the marketplace to be able to do this, to create a table of your fields using a script. But then I took another script and like one table at a time, like that I was focusing on, I had it look at all the fields on the table. So my fields are now records, and I had to iterate over each field record and find out how many records had a value in that field on that table. So then I could populate and show how many of those fields were actually empty, like in a table, which made it really easy to be like, oh, none of these fields have values. So I can look at those first and decide if I can delete them. But that's just one little trick.
Yep.
Yeah. One other like incredibly simple thing that took me too long to discover was that if you go into the tools part next to extensions, you can click on manage fields and actually just see all the fields there and delete them and edit them. I've also done it where I've taken a screenshot of that list, put it into ChatGPT and said, can you give this back to me as text, one per line, copy that, and then paste it into, as you said, a table where I can then have all of my fields listed there. And sometimes if I'm doing automations with something like N8N or just programming, I can use those fields as sort of a reference for it to know what's going on rather than, I guess, querying all the tables and figuring out what the fields are. It can break, but it's a little hacky way to kind of get all the fields.
Yeah. Absolutely. I find that super, super useful because then you can like document too and be like, these things are used in this automation or whatever. There's a million things you can do from that point. It's really fun.
Yeah.
One thing that one of my clients actually ended up doing on their own was they had this legacy base that had been in place for forever, and it was set up with a schema that they thought they needed, but they realized later down the line that they needed something different. So they had a lot of extra fields. They had not enough tables, actually, and several other things, and it was made at the time before interfaces existed. So what they ended up doing was they created an interface that had all of the fields that they know that they need. And then they came back to our team and said, if it's not on this interface, we don't need it. It's not necessarily saying that the base doesn't need it. Like there might be helper fields that might help calculate certain stuff that they see, but they did the due diligence of saying, well, I know how I do my job. And in my day-to-day, these are the handful of fields that my role is responsible for. So that was very helpful for our team in saying, okay, if we click delete on all of these fields, if one of the dependencies is not that interface, then I know that my client doesn't need it. And, I don't recommend just bulk deleting without checking yourself, but that is I think a decent approach is to design an interface. It doesn't have to be pretty, but create a grid view that's like, here's all the stuff that I know I need, and then use that as like a negative dependency of, if it has this, leave it, and if it doesn't have it, then maybe it's okay to get rid of.
Yeah, I actually really love that because it kind of makes it super obvious no matter who's the one trying to delete the field. It's like, and even if you made the interface name like, don't delete this field.
Critical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Oh, we lost Dan.
Well, he was the one sharing his screen, and he's the only one who can allow us to share screens. So
hopefully he gets back. But yeah, I could talk about cleaning up fields forever. I did another thing recently where I wrote a script to find any field that ended in the word copy or had a number as the end. So that way, because those are the ones that, if people don't know what they're doing and they're adding extra links, and then you end up with like links to other tables and they all end with 2, 3, 4, whatever.
Yep.
And then, I just wrote a script to be able to quickly find where all of those fields were. And that was really, really helpful.
Yeah. And are you both good at when you make like a helper field that is for a specific moment in time where you're doing a specific task to get rid of it? I often keep it because I'm thinking like, I'm probably going to need this in the future. And then I never end up needing it again.
What I try to do is preface it with the hourglass emoji to just say to myself, this is temporary. And if I come back to a base a month later and an hourglass thing is still there, I know I can get rid of it. And similar to Alli, I had a script that I use. I might actually end up publishing it. It'll go through and ask you which table has a bunch of linked records that you want to rename, linked record fields. and it'll allow you to select a naming convention for those fields. So name it after whatever its companion field is named, give it just the same name, or name it after the table that it's linking to, and a couple other options. So you can click one button and have them all named, right? Because like Alli, I had so many bases that just had like a bunch of contact records linked to a project, but on the contacts table, it's projects 1, projects 2, projects 3, and that's not useful. You don't know what each field is for.
Exactly. That's really helpful to be able to do that, especially before the dependency checker, trying to figure out is like, well, which one is this? I don't actually know which field this links to. It's so frustrating. Yeah. One final thing I will say I did too is I have a script, and I think I've shared it on the podcast before. I'm happy to share it again. It's super, super simple. It literally, you just copy and paste it and click run, and it shows you all the fields that are broken in your base. So all the fields that have the little triangle next to it, like there's something happened that it's no longer working, because that's something you can access via scripting. So it's super easy. It just shows you, boom, here's everything that's not working.
Yeah, great.
Sorry about that. My internet likes to crash only during this podcast hour. All right. Well, let's move on. Okay, this is general AI news. Big acquisition. OpenAI bought Windsurf for $3 billion. I mentioned this in Slack. Windsurf's only been around for 6 months, less than 6 months, something like that. They went live, I think, in November. And so that's quite the acquisition after 6 months in existence. Pretty crazy. Quite. So Windsurf is basically, if you're in the AI development realm, it's an editor similar to Cursor, competitive to Cursor, that came out recently to help you build with AI.
That is wild news. That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Because I use Cursor heavily, and the OpenAI, like I go through the Reddits, and very few people use any of the OpenAI APIs for that. People tend to use Claude and Gemini, and it could be that this is why they haven't provided that much support or like really paid attention to making it good for Cursor, is because they had this in mind. So it's a very interesting thing.
Maybe. Okay, last one or two more. Upcoming events. It's always good to see what's going on. I didn't realize in Boston in 2 days or in a week, there's an event, an in-person one. So if you're in that area,
that's me.
Yeah.
I'm going to that page right now.
Yeah. This one is there. Then if you're going to any of these, look like this one's going on right now. UXDX. This one I'd love to go to in Sydney. There's one in Germany, and then Paris, Melbourne, and then LA. So it looks like those are the upcoming live events if you want to go out there. I have a comment here going back to the Windsurf. It's fairly new, but the company has been building for a while. Kudos to them. That's true. Yeah, they have been around before that. Okay, last one, a fun one to end on. This guy is the Michelangelo of Microsoft Excel. So I was watching this video, comes from Great Big Story, which puts out pretty cool short snippets. He basically draws using like the line figure in Excel. So you can draw lines in Excel, and he does all of this in Excel and then prints it off. He's Japanese, he's in Japan, and but that's some pretty cool stuff. I don't know if I can show this. You can kind of see some of the he's done all in Excel.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I wonder how you start with making this your medium.
Yeah. He talks about it. He said he was too cheap to buy paint. And he's like, so I've got a computer. I'll just use this. And he didn't even want to buy like Adobe or something else.
That's so funny.
paint by numbers to a new level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually like, I relate to this like way more than one would think. It's kind of funny. I really I hate Microsoft Word with a fiery passion, and I refuse to use it. And for the longest time, part of my job was creating these really intricate PDFs, and I had to make these like really like, tiny little check boxes and all these different places. And I was like, I am not touching Word for this. So I took Microsoft Excel and I just created a template for myself where I made the whole sheet was just little 1/4 inch squares. Like I made all the cells be a 1/4 inch by a 1/4 inch, and then I just merge them where I need them merged and like make these really intricate Excel pages. Like, and that's exactly kind of what this reminds me of. Like I could imagine coloring in each one of those little squares, and I love that.
That's awesome. Man, he's put some pretty. You still got to be even maybe more artistic to figure this out.
Mm-hmm. I thought this was going to be pointillism. Like he made all of the, rows and columns a similar size, very small, and then coloring each individual cell to form a larger picture. But this is, the line tool in Excel is just simply not one that I reach for personally.
Yeah, very cool stuff. Let's see if you could do that in Airtable. That would be very impressive. I'm not aware of maybe now with the custom extensions in interfaces.
There's something W. Van Hall did, I believe, way back in the day. He like made this crazy heat map in Page Designer, and I still have no idea how he did it, but wild.
That's true. If anybody could do it, maybe that's where he's gone off, and why we haven't heard from him. He's in a basement somewhere. He'll come out with his artwork.
We need one episode where it's just looking back at W's old posts and trying to do them in modern Airtable. They were already difficult to do in 2018 or so.
Yeah.
I just wonder what you could do today.
Cool.
That'd be fun.
That wraps up our Around the Bases. If you are running your business in Airtable, it's best practice to make sure your data is stored outside of Airtable. That's where OntoAir Backups comes in. It stores your data, your schema, your attachments all outside of Airtable into Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, or OneDrive, and also has restore functionality if you need to restore your data back into Airtable. Check it out at OntoAir. Use promo code BuiltOnAir for a discount and start backing up your data today. And with that, let's learn more about Scott and your story. Camille's going to ask some questions. Put you in the spotlight.
Well, welcome, Scott. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, classic question. How long have you been using Airtable?
It has been probably about 6 years of heavy use, maybe 7 years of experimentation.
Do you remember the first use case you had where whatever you were using before just wasn't cutting it?
Yeah, I do, and it'll be a bit of a story, but I used to work as a designer for Apple for about 6 years, and my task, I was working for a team trying to figure out what's the future of collaboration and collaboration software, especially for enterprises and for Apple specifically. Like, can we make something internally? Would we ever consider making it something that's external also? And so I had to research tons and tons of tools and see what was out there. And the biggest problem that they were kind of plagued with inside the company, and honestly probably still are, but is that there are so many different teams using so many different tools, and they're all siloed from each other. And they all have data stored in a slightly different format, and they don't talk to each other. And of course, you can use tools like Zapier to try to connect them all, but when you're talking about the entire company and all the different tools and all the different instances of it, there wasn't a great way to do that. And to me, Airtable doesn't solve all those issues, but it was sort of the gold standard of having almost any type of information to be stored in a very simple to use format. But whether you were tracking tasks, you were tracking, like KPIs, contacts, CRM, like any type of information you were tracking, it could work for that. And to me, that was a very powerful thing. And the fact that you could connect it between things. So I found it to be awesome. And I started using it for my own personal life. There are instances of it being used at the company, but they were looking to create kind of what we came up with was creating a solution that wasn't the source of truth for any of the information. You still might use Asana or Airtable or whatever else, but it could bring in all the information. So there'd be one source of truth for each project that had all the information you needed. It was a very cool project that I haven't really seen come out. Any companies make sense, which was like 5 or 6 years ago. So it's possible they have, but Airtable was sort of at the time the best alternative I could find to something like that. So that's how I got started.
It's interesting because I often find myself trying to think back to when I first started using Airtable, which is around the same time, I think 2018 for me. And at the time, obviously a useful platform because I ended up using it. And here I am 1,000 years later, still talking about it. But there are a lot of features that I'm used to today that weren't there at the time. So there was no blocks or extensions or apps or whatever they're called now. There was no interfaces. There was automations, but they were pretty simple. There was no syncing, etc. But to your point, it still provided an easy place to go to put in data that could be in not any structure, but a lot of different structures. So importing stuff from other applications to have that data in one place, as straightforward as it could have been at the time.
Yeah. And I think something else to that point of like not any structure, but many, is that I do think a lot of times we use like a note of some sort, a shared note, for something that could be cells and rows. And I think that there's just a lot of value in being able to even just like single select, multi-select, to be able to turn it into like a discrete unit, because so much gets written down and then lost because it isn't usable, because it is this, it's like this amorphous shape. It's a paragraph. And being able to turn things into different fields and different columns that are discrete units, make them like usable, make them usable for formulas. And I guess something that is interesting, we'll get into the AI stuff, is that the paragraphs start to become more usable because it can interpret it and decide, categorize it into something that then can be used in a if-then statement, how to react to this. But I just think there's such power in like discrete, concrete objects, which Airtable kind of forces you to do.
Mm-hmm. My sort of day-to-day is building applications for other people, and I find myself saying internally, you're going to get a strongly typed system if it kills me.
Yeah.
And it's one of the benefits of using a system like Airtable, in that you can be pretty strict about what the form in which you're collecting data. So you can take a status field in a number of ways, but once you make a decision, that field is one type, and all of the other data in that whole column or field is going to look very similarly. So it does kind of force you to make some decisions, which can be changed down the line. You can change your base, but it is helpful to make a decision about your data, so it's not so freeform that no one understands it.
Yeah, totally.
So after you started getting comfortable and using Airtable in your own sort of day-to-day life, what was your sort of next big thing that you put Airtable for use to?
Yeah, so I, after being there for like 6 years, I knew I wanted to leave. I had this idea of something that I wanted to create. My long-term goal is a way to visualize thoughts and emotions in a more concrete way, like almost the way we're forcing types here, like to do that with emotions and thoughts and create this model. It's a long thing. It's like my long-term project, but in order to work on that, I wanted a way to be able to make some money as I started to work on that. And I just had this funny idea. I used to live in San Francisco, and had this idea for a millennial themed tarot card deck. I wasn't into tarot at the time, but this is probably too much information, but I went on a date with someone who was like religiously into Soul Cycle, and it's just like, this is such a millennial version of like religion, just, you know, like spirituality. And I just was like, it's like a tarot card. And so I started making them, and I started selling them, and it was going decently. And so I started finding retail stores that could potentially sell it, and I wanted to reach out to them. And that's when I started using Airtable heavily. So I use Airtable as like the content management system to create all 78 cards of the, and I don't know if I'm sharing information, sharing screen, but I can show a little bit of what that looks like. Am I sharing? Should I pull it up?
I can make it right now. It's good.
And if you haven't heard of Chris Dancy, you'd love him.
We messaged a little bit, and I'm actually getting married in 2 weeks, so I've been very busy. Thank you. So I really should follow up with him more. But anyway, so I have, all 78 cards listed here. I have the original card artwork, I have my new card artwork, and then I have all the text that ended up being in the guidebook. And so I use this as basically the content management system. And it's kind of, I think it was my very first project, and it's been the source of truth like all the way through, until this past year I actually got a publishing deal for it, and also to make a Gen Z version, which you can see a sneak peek here. And I had to hire a Gen Z writer to work with me because I don't know all the jokes. So we use the AI. You can see there's 238 hidden fields. There's a lot of people like giving feedback who got access to it temporarily, like voting on which cards they thought were their favorite, and and then I used my AI, which I can get into, to make different versions of like jokes and coming up with the iconography for the different images based on the original descriptions, and basically being able to use AI in mass and bulk all at once. To do things like generate jokes, to generate hashtags that are relevant. And that's what you can see all of these are. These were all AI generated. So ultimately, I ended up writing the whole guidebook, but I used a lot of the stuff that the AI created to do that. So I don't remember what the original question was, but this is kind of what my foray was into Airtable for my personal use. And then I also started using it to do outreach and to track like influencers I wanted to talk to and retail stores. So it's like a CRM. And during this time, I am extremely lazy in some ways and hardworking in others. And I was frustrated having to copy and paste back and forth to ChatGPT. And I was like, there's just got to be an easier way. And that's where I built this extension to let me do that. I can.
Yeah, let me do a transition real quick on that. So so you're going to talk about the product you built. So the company is Tablemate, but the product is Text AI. Is that the name of it?
AI Text.
AI
Tablemate, yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Why don't you walk us through that? Let me put it back on the screen. Okay. Your screen is showing. Yep.
So what did I do with the table I just had open? So I'll go to a more universal example, but at the time, Airtable didn't have AI out yet. And so as I was just saying, it was a pain to have to copy and paste back and forth to ChatGPT. And like I had 78 cards that I needed to create these writings for. And then I had like 2,000 retail stores that I wanted to create custom messages for. And I just was not going to do that by hand. So I built this extension, and I've since improved it. But essentially, you have a you have a prompt that you can write, and then you have the fields. You can either type a field in here that you want to add, which would be shows up in ping, so you know that it's a field, and you can also just type it like this. And then you can preview it, and you can see, oh, I see. I have this as one of the outputs, so it's not letting me have it as an input. Anyway, you can type in prompts here. You can also append additional fields that you want to send over to the AI. The AI will process whatever it is that you're asking for and take in all the information from that row that you want. And then it will output it to the columns that you want that are generally empty. And it started out as just one output. You could just do one at a time. Now you can do multiple fields, all for one prompt. And Airtable ended up coming out with a similar thing about 3 or 4 months later. I don't think they copied me or anything. I think it was like an inevitable idea. But what I noticed when they came out with it, and if you guys have tried it, you've probably seen, is that it is extremely expensive, in my opinion. So they charge per token or per credits. And I think to get a good response using AI, one of the top things I hear is that people get kind of unuseful responses, especially if you're trying to create something like social media content that's so subjective. It isn't just like a quick data transformation. You need to give like really rich, long prompts, and they charge based on the length of the prompt. So to get like a rich prompt is going to cost you like 30 credits or so. And it ends up being that you can only use like 30 to 100 rows and you're out of credits. So I just want people to I'm very passionate about people like creating their own businesses and just being able to do more work with fewer people and less time. And so you pay for tokens directly with OpenAI, which means that you get charged pennies on it. And so you can have really long prompts and get much better responses. So you can see like this prompt I have in here is extremely long. And it was a lot of back and forth with ChatGPT to create it. And it's defining the format I want and, like different parts to embody. And then I can give more specific instructions for each field in here. And then you can run it. So in this example, I have this list of ideas for posts for marketing my Millennial Tarot deck. And so if I want to create like a year's worth of social media posts, I might have 365 rows in here. I just have like a brief description. I created all of these in ChatGPT. And I said, just give me one per line. I copy and pasted it in here. And then I want to start actually creating like an Instagram video script, an Instagram caption, what the first comment could be on that post, a post for X, a email subject line for my newsletter, and the email body. And I want all of those to relate to each other. It should feel like one cohesive post, not separate prompts for every single one. And so I was able to make each of those an output. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory, so it knew kind of what it needs to write. Plus, I had the description here. And then I put some extra description for like the email body. And then you can I like to run a test first, which is just on 3 rows. So I look for the first empty rows, essentially. And it will take a second. If you do a ton at once, like it takes a couple seconds first, but then they all just start popping in. So let's pray that in this live demo, it works. It almost.
I like.
There we go.
One thing that's cool about this is I like, being able to update multiple records all off the same prompt, because that's not how Airtable's AI works. So that's a really cool feature.
Yeah.
Does Airtable AI let you update multiple fields with the same prompt, or do they each have their own prompt?
Each has their own.
Yeah. So it's a lot of consolidation.
Unless you did through an automation.
Yeah,
sure.
You could output. You could get multiple as like a JSON or something, and then update.
Okay.
That's what I'm doing. We have to be really careful to parse it so that nothing's ever empty.
Yeah. Yeah. So I will say, I mean, there are benefits to like in terms of using this versus using Airtable AI. Airtable AI has all of those like additional features that aren't just this, which are like recommending which record might be relevant, or using a token when you generate a formula, even though people always complain that they're not great. I still find those to be pretty handy, and I find that I don't need to pay for an AI subscription to have enough credits to do those tasks. I find that also like I don't have it built such that you can that it will just automatically run this. You do manually press the button, but you can at the moment choose a formula field or a checkbox field. And so it will see everything that passes a certain condition based on other columns. It will decide to run on just those rows. So you could say that once text has been filled in, then you run it on that row when you press run. So that's another area where AI text, I think, is beneficial. And I'm sure that they will catch up on some of the stuff I have here, like multiple outputs. But the cost, then it comes largely down to cost. So I have found another good thing is it's really useful if you are iterating on something and you want to just like keep trying your prompt and changing it quickly. You can just select a row and then use the selected method, and I can just run it on that one row or do a couple of rows, which is really handy. I like to do a couple of tests, see where it's wrong, like where it's producing results I don't want, tweak my prompt, and then once I'm getting consistently good responses, I'll press all and I'll run it on the entire thing. And yeah, and like in, a minute, this is a dangerous move, but let's see what happens. You can get, just a ton of content. So this is for more like subjective kind of content, like creating a social media post, but I'll also use it for things, in addition to like iterating on something. I use N8N heavily in my workflow. And a lot of times I'll just forget to put something, some part of the data that I need in my N8N flow. And so to retroactively kind of fix that, I'll use this tool also. So like I work with this lawyer to collect a bunch of information for like tax foreclosures. And my cleaning lady is making vacuum noises in the background. Hopefully you don't hear that, but I forgot to include like the title. So I just wrote a brief prompt that can, like look at the first name of each person and just figure out what the gender is so that when I write letters to them, it can be the right format. And that's like a perfect task for AI that no formula that I'm aware of can do. So
if it's an extraordinarily long formula with every possible first name.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. So that's your other option. You could have extraordinarily long formula.
Yeah.
So that's just like another little places. Let's also check on this. Yeah. So this looks like it's still going, but it's filled in a bunch.
Very cool.
Places that I've seen people use this, like customers that I've spoken with, there's like a few financial groups, and one of them loads the text from financial reports in. I think I probably hit a rate limit, but they'll put in financial reports, and then if they have like multiple KPIs that they want to pull out from that report and they want to do it for like 100 different companies, they can load one into each, into a cell for each company, and then pull out all of those different like key metrics that were reported in that, financial report into the different fields. Another big use case is people who are building out like content platforms. Like you saw, I'm doing that for my Tarot deck. but there's a couple startups that use it, and one has this platform where they have like a massive database of what do you call it? Like doctors' offices and medical supply information, and they have an online platform where you can view all that. And so they're taking like the bits of information they have and generating like longer paragraphs to fill out all of the information that's then powering their platform, basically. And they're doing like 10,000. They've done something like 10,000 records. So far, people have processed, I think it's like 800 million tokens or something through it, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So that was a lot. I just rambled on about happy to answer questions and stuff.
Cool. So yeah, tell us. So they can find it in the marketplace, AI text, and very cool. This is awesome.
Yeah, and you can go to tablemate.io also. You just connect your Airtable token and a ChatGPT token, and then you're all ready. Set to go.
Awesome.
So
Very
cool.
cool. Thank you, Scott, for sharing that. Okay, we got 5 minutes, Alli. We got enough time?
Yeah, these are really quick.
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right.
Scott, yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, we can hear the vacuum.
Okay, so Alli's going to share. Before that, if you haven't joined our community, join us. BuiltOnAir.com/join gets you in with thousands of other Airtable enthusiasts and users talking every day about Airtable. So join us. BuiltOnAir.com/join will get you in for free. And let's learn some tricks of the trade from Alli in interfaces.
Awesome. All right. So these are just two little hacks that I sometimes use that I think are fun. One is around legends in interfaces. I am not a huge fan of the built-in Airtable legend on the charts. I think the dots are too small. I want to be able to really see what those colors mean. Sometimes the colors are way too similar. There's just a lot of things that would change. And it also takes up a lot of real estate of the actual chart. So like, I usually would prefer to keep the legend hidden, but sometimes it's nice to be able to see it. So as a little hack that I've done a few times, and it's actually gotten a lot easier now because of Airtable's new feature around translating or formatting rather what the output of a formula is to look like a single select. So that's what I'm doing for this hack is I'm using these formula fields. So let me just show you what it looks like here. So it's literally just 3 formulas, and each one just has the value I want displayed in quotes. And then on the formatting tab, I'm using that same value and very simply just setting it up so that it literally always says up. Same thing for down and the NA. And I'm just matching those colors to what my actual formula is that I have this chart grouped by, which is, I go to where is it grouped by under Y? It's grouped by a field called up/down, which is showing me if I added the emoji for fun, but this is literally just going to either say NA if my percent change between this year and the year before is 0, then otherwise up if it's up, down if it's down, so above or below 0. And those colors are defined here. So essentially, I'm just kind of taking each one of those options and creating a formula field for it so that every single record on this table has those 3 values in a field, in 3 separate fields. Then you can display those on your page, and this will only work on like a detail page or a record review. Unfortunately, you can't display the big, pretty single select things on a dashboard. But if you change the appearance to large and then just right click and say hide labels for entire row, that's how I'm doing these 3 fields here. So it kind of just turns it into your own little custom legend. And just keep in mind, if you change the colors on what you're grouping your chart by, then you'd want to come back and update your colors to match that as well in these 3 fields. But I find it to be a pretty nice little hack because now you've got more space in your chart. It's not taken up by those, the real estate's not taken up by the legend. And I just find these to be much prettier and attention grabbing.
That's a cool hack. I had to build a legend for a list view that was colored a certain way. Each of the rows were colored based on certain conditions. And I had to use like emojis to say, if it's green, it means whatever. And it was very annoying to have to update because it was like a text element on the page. So if you changed it, you had to go back and edit the interface. This is much nicer.
Yeah, I find this to be fun. It's easy and simple to set up. I used to have to do all these crazy things before the single select could be formatted like this, or the formula could be formatted like this. Yeah, that's a fun little quick one you can do for sure. And then I know we're like at time, but the other thing really quickly is I have the same data here displayed as quarters and then again as months. And I don't love how much real estate this takes up. And sometimes people get confused, I've noticed, as I'm building many dashboards. If I have these charts next to each other, they'll be like, what am I looking at? What's the difference between these? And it's the same data. It's just quarter versus month. So I'd love to be able to give the user the control to switch between those 2 visualizations. And with conditional visibility, which is available on the business plan and up, you can do that in a simulated way here. So Camille's done a demo before on an edit button here. So you click the button to edit, and then it turns certain fields editable and hides others. And this is very similar to that. So if I click quarters, it's going to flip this. So now I'm looking at the quarters. And if I click months, it's going to flip it back to the months. You could, expand on this in a million ways, but this is a really fun little quick thing you could try. And essentially all I'm doing is I'm setting this view option field, which is a single select with months and quarters. And that's what those buttons are doing here. Is the months button is an update record, setting that view option to months. And finally, this group for the months is conditionally displayed when that view option is months. Same thing conversely for the quarters. And all together, you get this pretty little switching visualization.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. Tricks of the trade.
2 quick hacks.
That's awesome. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Scott, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Excited to see what else you've got going on. And congrats on the wedding as well coming up.
Thank you.
All right. And that concludes this week's show. We will see you all next week with our next episode. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out our sponsor, OntoAir Backups, automated backups for Airtable. We'll see you next time on the Built on Air podcast.